All right, good evening. It's Monday, May 18th, 2000. This is a committee of the whole meeting of Sylvania City Council and about proposed resolution number 13, 2020. And this is intended to be an opportunity for public comment, and I don't see any actual public visitors here tonight. I don't think they're correct. Okay. So present this evening are council members, myself, Mary Westfall, Katie Capolini, Mark Fry, Doug Hanum, Brian McCann, Lindsay Stow, Patrick Richardson. Also from City Administration, Kevin Aller, Leslie Brining, Chuck Silvernail, Bill Sanford, Sharon Bucher, and Mayor Stow have joined us. And guests, Danny Woodcock from TARTA.
Hi, Danny.
He's the board chair, so we're glad you're here. And also Russell Mills, who I think is from Bowling Green, probably. Is that right? Yeah. So that we did have a proposal that was emailed out to all of you. It was an analysis of the TARTA economic region, and it was prepared by, I think we do have some time to respond to, since there's no one here for public comment. We might have, if Russell's interested, he could do a quick spin through the proposal and give his high-level overview. I didn't prepare him for that, but how are you with that, Russell?
Yeah, that works perfectly for me. I don't know if it would be good for me to share my screen with the folks online so they could see the presentation, or if that would work for you.
If you can do that, that'd be great.
I don't know if I'm able, but I will try.
They've got it. A copy of it.
Is that working for folks?
It is.
Okay, great. Let me full screen it. I think we're good to go. So thank you all very much for this opportunity. I've worked with Danny and Kim at TARTA for the last couple months, on how to present the information that we collected as part of the economic impact analysis of TARTA. So I'll give you a bit about myself and my team at the Center for Regional Development. We are sort of a research and technical assistance arm of BGSU. We have expertise in economic and community development. We're funded in part through the state of Ohio through the Rural University Program, but also through the Economic Development Administration at the federal level. We're one of their 50 university centers around the country who's funded to do analysis like similar to this, but also we do hands-on economic development work and strategies. You can see some of our key areas of expertise, including economic impact analysis. We work quite a bit on demographic economic data around the region, and some of you may have attended our State of the Region conference, which is one of the larger economic development events in the region. Before we begin, I wanted to mention the sponsors or who funded the economic impact analysis. So there were 5 organizations that were part of that, which was TMACOG, the Toledo Regional Chamber of Commerce, the Area Office on Aging, TARTA, and then the Holland Springfield Jets. So real high-level overview, and I can go through a little bit of the methodology if you're interested, if you have specific questions on specific figures. But overall, TARTA supports 414 jobs, roughly $17.8 million in payroll, and $52.3 million in the economy of the existing service region around the area. Interestingly, TARTA generates $1.75 million annually in tax revenues to the state of Ohio and local governments, in the footprint where it currently serves. And then, I think this is really, for me, was one of the take-home messages. For every $1 invested by taxpayers in TARTA, there's an economic impact or an economic return of approximately $3 across the region. Any questions thus far? I can just dive in real quick. It'll be very brief on sort of how we do this. When we calculate the economic impact for a public transit system, we try to be, our methodology is very conservative in that we look only for the direct things we can measure. So we captured 2 key areas. One was the operational activity impact, so sort of the number of employees that TARTA supports and the jobs that they have, and also the capital expenditures. So what are they spending on, buildings, equipment, buses, et cetera, that we have receipts for and can look at and see, okay, that was a tangible expense that was occurred within our region. We look at 3 key things, which I've already presented: jobs, payroll, and economic output. And this is where a lot of people get tripped up. So there's the direct impacts, which are those the payroll that's paid on a day-to-day basis, the capital expenses that are made. But then there's also what we call indirect impacts. So if TARTA purchases office supplies from a local company, chairs, desks, etc., for the office, or fuel, or a new bus, the suppliers that purchase the equipment to make those end products are what we would call indirect impacts, because they wouldn't exist if it wasn't for that initial purchase that was made, the direct impact by TARTA. Induced impacts are a bit, so really the indirect are measuring supply chain effects. And I think we're all a little more familiar with that now due to COVID-19 and some of the challenges we've had with accessing groceries and things. I think the average person's understanding supply chains a bit more. And so indirect impacts are measuring that. Induced impacts measure the recycling of wages, right? So when TARTA pays an employee wages, there's a direct impact. But then that employee then goes out and spends those dollars in the economy, whether it be at the local restaurants, at the local retailers. That additional purchase is what we would call an induced impact. Okay, and then finally we can assess the tax impacts out of that as well. So quickly, these were the inputs that we used for our model. We looked at TARTA's operating funding sources. Interestingly, TARTA is funded 44% by local funds, and only 3% by state funds, which is a bit different than most other transit systems around the country, and that in a lot of other places, state funding makes up a higher proportion of that share. Capital expenditures, which you can see, they fluctuate quite a bit. So what we did to estimate the annual impact was take the 5-year average of those expenses, because it wouldn't be prudent to estimate a $5.5 million expense in 1 year when that's very out of line with what previous years or similar years looked like. We talked a lot about what a multiplier effect is. You probably heard that term in economic impact analyses. What these are basically, it's a simple equation: the direct impacts, plus the indirect and induced divided by the direct. So roughly, it's when we spend $1, what's the multiplier that's generated? Is it Is it an additional dollar? Is it an additional $2? And so a multiplier of 1.5 would represent an induced and indirect that is 50% of that initial direct expense. And so here we broke these out, the results, to show, and I'll walk through this pretty quickly. Table 1's looking at, this is the economic impact of TARTA's operations. So directly, TARTA supports 306 jobs. But then those supply chain effects of purchases made by TARTA support an additional 62 indirect jobs. And then the spending of employee wages in the local economy supports another 44 jobs for that total of 411. And you can see the labor income, the value added, and the output that go with that as well. So, in sum, right, we're talking about $50 million that are supported locally by TARTA's annual operations. And again, I can't hammer that home. These are annual numbers. So every year, these are the impacts that we see. And what I did over here on the right is look at the top industries that are affected by TARTA's operations, right? So unsurprisingly, transit, right, and ground passenger transportation. It's always, whatever you're looking at, it's always going to be number one. But I like to look down the list a little bit, right? You see insurance agencies, brokerages, those, right, are obviously a lot of insurance activity from public transit system, real estate, petroleum, right, the diesel fuel that goes into operating the system, waste management, banking. So I think it's interesting to look at some of the downstream effects of what public transit supports. Also, right, you got your wholesale trade and some of the other industries as well. When we look at capital expenditures, right, again, the capital expenditures for TARTA are fairly limited. We're talking, when we looked at the average, we're talking about $1.7 million in annual capital expenses, which are fairly low for a public transit system. So what you're seeing, right, if you reduce your spending, you also reduce your economic impact. And so when capital expenditures are low, you're going to see a low economic impact. And that's what we see here with roughly three employees supported in the local area. And again, you can see the breakout of those industries there on the right. And again, we get to the overall economic impact of 414 jobs supported with roughly $52.3 million in annual economic output supported by TARTA's activities. We broke out here by operations and capital expenditures, the estimated tax revenue that's collected at the state and local level. When the program we use is called Implan, and it's probably one of the top 2 or 3 economic impact modeling software systems. When you start really getting at the granular level, it's really difficult to measure these the tax increments of where they're going, right? When we're measuring across a service area with moving buses, right, it's very difficult to know exactly how much money is staying within Sylvania versus other municipalities across the region, the city, etc. So, but we do, because of the way that their model works and the sort of the receipts that they collect, we have a good estimate of what that tax collection is on the whole. And so that's how we can come up with the 1.75 million in annual tax revenue. We did a simple ROI analysis to get that, for every dollar invested, we get $3 back in economic impact. So basically what we did was take the economic impact from the investment, which in this case, the initial investment is what TARTA, what the taxpayers in the region invested in TARTA, which last year, between capital expenses and operating expenses was roughly 13.2 million for the local taxpayers. And we, obviously subtract that from the total economic impact of 52.2 and then divide, right? And that will get you the roughly $3 investment. So for every dollar the taxpayers are putting into the system, they're getting roughly $3 back. Sorry, that's my team at the Center for Regional Development, and I'm happy to answer any questions you may have about some of the figures or numbers that we have here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Russell. I think that was helpful. It was helpful to get that information in advance. I think all council members had a chance to review it and kind of digest it a little bit. Just for my benefit, though, could you repeat to me how you calculate the indirect and the induced amount? Yeah,
sure. So indirect is, again, I think the easiest way to think of it, supply chains, right? So if we, let's say that, I like to use the example of a desk, right? TARTA purchase, and having visited the offices recently, this would be a prudent purchase. So let's say that Kim goes out and buys some new office furniture for the staff, right? So when that initial purchase of the desk is made, that's the direct impact. But then that supplier, okay, let's say that they're a local office supply company. They then go out and make a purchase of additional inventory of additional office supplies for them. If they go out and buy a new delivery van, those would be the indirect impacts of that initial purchase, right? Whatever proportion of it is. Okay, so let's say that the office furniture purchase that TARTA made was $100,000. That's the direct. But then the company goes out and makes an additional $20,000 in that's probably very high. Let's say $2,000 in purchases to support that $100,000 purchase. That would be what we would capture as the indirect. The induced is if I were to make, let's say my paycheck this week, if I'm a TARTA bus driver, would be $2,000. I then take that check and I go, let's say well, in this environment, I go pick up, dinner somewhere, right? I would say Fifth Street, but I know that's probably a sore subject with Sylvania. So, but if I went to another restaurant in the region and picked up, dinner, that transfer to that restaurant, that recycling of that dollar in the local economy is what we're capturing in the induced impacts. Does that make sense?
It does. And in fact, I couldn't see part of the diagram, which is why I think I got myself mixed up, but I have the hard copy here, so that helps. So really, TARTA employs 306 direct employees.
Correct.
Okay.
And that's full-time equivalents, right? So it may be a different, right? If Kim was like looking at the number of employees they have, they may be different than what that number is actually representing.
Yep. Okay. Any other questions from any other members of council?
I had a question. Is there anything that you guys have seen in the numbers as far as the ROI, how it affects like a metropolitan downtown area like Toledo compared to a suburb like Sylvania?
That's a great question. We haven't done that type of analysis, but I know those exist, right? I would say anecdotally, without having done that kind of quantitative analysis, right, that you're, wherever you have a higher concentration of, and remember, right, what we didn't capture here, and I think this is important, we didn't capture in this quantitative analysis the jobs that are supported by having transit. Okay, so I would keep that in mind, right? I mean, to me, that's the unquantified impact here. This is a conservative analysis, just looking at what TARTA spends and how that affects the local economy. But to your point, I think if you did a broader and a deeper analysis where you looked at what kinds of activities are supported, right? What service, what's the impact of having theoretical bus service from Sylvania to the Mud Hens game, right? What kind of economic activity would that generate, right? Or would having bus service to the airport, would that make an economic impact, right? Those would be pieces you could quantify in and of themselves. My overall take-home message would be that I wherever you have larger employment centers and higher potential for ridership is where you're going to see more economic impact from public transit. But I know there are studies that look at compare and contrast suburban versus inner city metropolitan commuting type bus services and their economic impacts. I have seen those.
Thank you. Any other questions for Russell? Thank you very much for your time today and your presentation and your efforts. We appreciate them. Let me share with the group, I neglected to mention in the beginning that Kim Dunham did indicate that she had a conflict with another one of the outlying communities tonight at 7 o'clock. So she was sorry she could not be here, but we do have Danny here. I don't know if there's anything you'd like to say, Danny, or if you're...
Yeah, appreciate everyone's time tonight. And Dr. Mills, I appreciate you joining us again. It's good to see you, even from afar. Thanks for the dig on our office chairs. I appreciate that. I do have a very short video that we had our team prepare with Laura having just joined us. We're starting to whiteboard all of the ideas that we really want to put forward as we start to reimagine what that transit system might look like. So I'm going to share my screen and play that for you right now, answer any other questions you guys might have after that, from that. And Russell, please feel free. You don't need to watch this video again if you don't want to, but I do appreciate seeing you. Let's see, Chrome. Here we go. Share sound. Great. Now I hope this works. We tried it beforehand. Give me a thumbs up if this audio is working.
We're reimagining TARTA and excited about the opportunity to move the system and our region forward. Today, we find ourselves at an important crossroads, giving us an incredible opportunity to reinvent together. Our community, customers, and businesses need a public transit system of the future. Currently, TARTA runs on a hub-and-spoke system. That means every fixed route line comes in and goes out of downtown Toledo, requiring riders to transfer. This model no longer fits our community's transportation needs. In addition, our region is preparing for...
I'm sorry, someone doesn't see the video?
We all don't see it. We see it right
Oh
now.
man, maybe it's because I full screened it. I'm so sorry.
No, Danny, we see your music player.
Yeah, okay, that's helpful. All right, I'll try again. Thanks. Chrome, let's try this. Now?
Looks
See it
like
up in
it.
the top. Yeah, it looks like it.
We're reimagining
How
TARTA
about that?
and excited about the opportunity to move the system and our region forward. Today, we find ourselves at an important crossroads, giving us an incredible opportunity to reinvent together. Our community, customers, and businesses need a public transit system of the future. Currently, TARTA runs on a hub-and-spoke system. That means every fixed route line comes in and goes out of downtown Toledo, requiring riders to transfer. This model no longer fits our community's transportation needs. In addition, our region is preparing for economic and population changes. To achieve success, Northwest Ohio must have an effective, efficient, and responsive public transit system. So we're focusing on 5 key areas: improving operational efficiencies, building a mobility ecosystem, focusing on an exceptional customer experience, deploying advanced technologies, and increasing the value to our communities and businesses while enhancing our riders' quality of life and access. Now, keeping those 5 areas in mind, we're going to explore things like multimodal mini-hubs, microtransit on-demand service to low-density and rural areas, and expanded paratransit service areas. Extending hours and locations to meet the needs of employers and our second and third shift workforce. More frequent service on high-demand corridors. Circulators in critical high-traffic areas. Building connections within our ecosystem to include things like bikes, scooters, rideshare services, van pools, intercity buses, rail, and more. Enhancing passenger amenities like lighted and heated bus shelters, better wayfinding, and real-time digital signs at bus stops. We'll also deploy more user-friendly technology like Wi-Fi on buses and a more efficient rider app that identifies routes and tracks vehicles in real time. Also, a brand new smart card fare system that lets you purchase fares before you board. TARTA is also building a new executive leadership team, experts who have led bus system redesign and rebranding efforts in other parts of the country. We're excited about all the opportunities that lie ahead as we work with community members and employers to completely redesign a public transit system to carry our region into the future. We look forward to sharing ideas as we reimagine a public transit system that serves many kinds of riders, is a valuable resource for businesses, and helps all of our communities thrive. The future of public transportation in Northwest Ohio is here. Now, get on board and join us as we embark on this transformational journey together.
All right. I do apologize for any technical difficulties I had there and you having to suffer through my Spotify playlists. But that and our first presentation is available at tarta.com/future. If the screen size may have been too small to see some of those things, the artist did a really good job of visually showing some of the ideas that we're hoping to convey in our plan and in our stakeholder considerations moving forward. Happy to answer any questions you might have for me now. I'll do my best to answer any questions you might have had for Kim too. And Dr. Mills stepped over probably my favorite fact in there was that Toledo drivers and people in the area lose $507 of productivity from driving their cars every year. I love that number. All right.
Thank you very much, Danny. That was a nice presentation.
Thank you.
When we got to see it, so we appreciate that. Any questions from members of council? I think you've done a very thorough job of showing us your efforts and your plan going forward. We're grateful for that. We feel, I think I speak from all council members and that we feel a new level of confidence in the leadership team that's in place and the vision that we're seeing you put forward. Just as a slight refresher, we did do our first reading on the legislation, which had been amended at our last meeting. And Mr. Hanem's amendments, I understand, have been fully accepted by TARTA, and that legislation is ready to continue to be advanced. So I think that there's no formal action to take tonight. It was really just making sure that we gave an opportunity for public comment and that we gave you an opportunity to show your other elements of your presentation. So again, one last ask on questions, and if there are none, we'll move to adjourn. Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second? It's been moved and second to adjourn this committee as a whole. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you very much. We appreciate your being here. Wait.
And Danny, we do have a report of this committee of the whole on the council agenda. And if you'd like to stay, we can move it up in our agenda to item 4A if council is amenable to that and see if they want to take action on this tonight or not.
Certainly, I would be very happy to stay. I'm also particularly interested in your conversations about downtown during COVID, so I'm happy to stay on. Thanks for the invite, Mayor.
Okay.
Thank you.